Please put your phone on mute. We're going live now. All right. Thank you for joining the Crisis Magazine's second episode of Crisis Conversations. We are going to look at the economic impact of the coronavirus on the African American community and Black families. We've seen the stories with the record number of unemployment. We've seen the stories of companies like Shake Shack and Ruth Chris getting loans that are meant for small businesses. And we've seen people like the Los Angeles Lakers, who are worth $4 billion, according to Forbes. So don't quote me on that. That's according to Forbes, who received $4.6 million under the Paycheck Protection Program. They have since, given the money back because they were sort of shamed into that. And there was an article that came out yesterday by CBS News that noted 90% of minority and women-owned businesses were locked out or shut out of the Paycheck Protection Program, up to 90%. So today we're going to talk about what this pandemic has meant to African American families, what this pandemic has meant to Black business owners, to entrepreneurs. First, we are going to I want to introduce my panel. Mr. William Spriggs, could you raise your hand? He is professor of economics at Howard University and chief economist at the AFL-CIO. And we have Ms. Danielle Solomon. Could you wave, Danielle? She's vice president of race and ethnicity at the Center for American Progress. And we have Mr. Marvin Owens, our very own Mr. Marvin Owens with the NAACP. He's the senior director for economic programs. But before our experts, unpack what this pandemic means for the African American community, we're going to talk to a few entrepreneurs and furloughed workers about their experience. I have Camila Akila.
Yes.
And I have Gay Span.
Hi, everybody.
Hi. So Camila, I'm going to start with you. Tell me who you are, what you do, and what your experience has been like during this pandemic.
Well, I want to thank you for having me on first. My name is Camila Akila. She said I am a business owner. I own the Hair Lounge 1 and 2, and I also rent out 2 salons to small businesses. So pretty much I own 4 hair salons. The impact has been, it's been tough. Just the unknown, as of March the 15th was when it went in effect of the non-essential employees closing down. So as of March the 15th, that means that all of my salons had closed, and we have a total of 7. I think it affects probably about 25 people in total that were out of work due to it closing. So, no income coming in from that. You think that there are programs set up, but then you hear that you don't get them. You get they ran out of money letters, and then it becomes kind of hopeless a little bit. Like you get scared of what's to come because we don't know when we're going to open back up because they keep pushing back, which is understandable because everything that's going on. But it starts off 2 weeks, and then it goes from 2 weeks to 3 weeks, and then it goes from 3 weeks to May 15th to June 10th, and so on and so forth. I'm located in Maryland, so I think we're currently at Maryland, DC are currently at June 10th, possibly opening back up. But realistically, the way the numbers are going, you kind of don't see that happening. To be completely honest, you're not as hopeful as that happening, and you're scared. You're scared to go back, with everything that's going on. So it's unsure times, You're scared of everything that you work for being washed out or putting yourself, like as a business owner, you work really hard to get out of the hole with opening a business because businesses are extremely difficult at times, only to be knocked down and put back in a hole, possibly going back, And then you hear big businesses like the Lakers today. Thank you for sharing that. And because I don't watch the news currently, I had to take a mental break from the news, so I wasn't aware of those. But places like Ruth Chris and so on and so forth. But those companies, I feel like they have access, so they got it in. Maybe the paperwork went in faster. That's how I was looking at it. Possibly the paperwork went in faster. That's why they were able to get it before we did.
Or maybe friends in high places.
Or maybe friends in high places. Or to be completely honest, at some point I felt like it wasn't set up for us. Like it was an illusion to calm us down. It was thrown out there to calm us down and make us be comfortable with shutting down, to give us hope. And it really wasn't set up for small businesses like myself.
So tell me, I'm getting feedback. Could you tell me where you are based?
Say that one more time.
Where are you based?
Oh, I'm in Fort Washington, Maryland.
So
I'm in PG County, Maryland.
Own 4 salons.
Yes, I have a business partner. So me and my partner, we own 4 salons located in Fort Washington, Maryland.
And you're not able to open any of them at this time?
Well, so just, I guess it was I don't have the dates, but I want to say last week, they allowed for you to have one essential worker. Like, I guess one essential would be like a military or police officer, somebody that has to have grooming for their job. So each salon was allowed one person to come in at a time. And you have to sanitize before and after and so on and so forth. But I own a salon and 9 people work there. So that didn't make sense. But one of my salons is a suite-based salon. So that means they have a room to themselves. So that salon, one of my barbers was able to go back and one of my stylists was able to go back because it's separated. It's isolated. So they're officially going back, I think starting today actually. And they'll be taking one person an hour or 2, but it'll only be one person in the salon at a time. So it's really not financially, worth opening up, because once you run the electric and they do one or how many people they can do a day, it's a stretch, just for the overhead per se as the business owner. It's a stretch, but I understand they need to make their money, and everybody's position is different. So I wanted them to have the option. So I presented my staff the option if you want to do it. But as a business owner, once I pay for the cleaning person, of course, because we're open now, my management company might not be as lenient or work with me because we are officially open. It's kind of those fears that the electric bill, it's just, and then you don't know if they're going to work, if they're going to be able to get people in there, because you don't know how many essential workers they have. But I figure some money is better than no money as far as them getting in there. But as the business owner, we open it up for 2 stylists. That's not going to cover our overhead. But I just wanted to put it out there for them to be able to take that opportunity, though.
So before I go to Gay, tell me, how has this impacted you financially, both professionally and personally? What financial impact has this had on you, both professionally and personally? And then I'm going to go to Gay.
Okay, so starting with financially, business-wise, it's so you have the overhead of 4 salons with electric, gas, water, utilities, internet, everything. You can't just cut it off because those things aren't canceling. They're just pushing it back on the back end. So pretty much once we go back in June, we have all those bills for the past 2 months. So, luckily my business, we've been open for 12 years and they've grown. So it started off with one business and they've grown. So me and my business partner, we kind of do well with saving because we do expect the unknown. Those aren't, we are hairstylists. So our personal business, as far as the styling part of us, really runs our income, where the businesses, we tend to use that as our savings, if that makes sense. So we do have savings for that, but to think that in 2 months, what you work really hard to save after opening a business, because one of our salons we just opened 2 years ago. So as you know, as a business owner, you don't initially make money from a business because you have to rebuild your what you put into it. So we're just getting to the point where we're paying off the debt from our business and stuff. So, we just started saving up for that. So to think that we finally feel like we got our footing and then in 2 months we got to give this lump sum to our management company for the rent, or because they don't, a lot of people think that management companies are wiping that bill or giving you a free month, or no, they're not. They're pushing it on the back end, possibly stretching it out. So those bills are still there. So that's stressful. I will say this, on a business sense, I was very stressed probably like a week ago, because I saw that all these big companies got the PPPs and the IDLs. I reached out on Facebook and kind of had a very frustrating moment, and I shared that, how it's affected my business and my personal. And out of nowhere, the response was amazing. So a lot of our clients kind of blessed us with my staff with just cash out blessings, just thinking, because they hadn't thought about us being out of business. Because I don't know too many people that aren't working, to be honest. A lot of my friends work for the government. A lot of them work for companies that they're just teleworking, so I don't know personally a lot of people that are off work aside from my staff and a couple of my friends. So, but that next day when I woke up, to my surprise, I have received the EIDL, the small business EIDL loan for my salon, which was a surprise because I had not gotten any feedback. I didn't get an email saying that the paperwork went through. I hadn't gotten an email that expected. I didn't get anything. I just woke up to it in my account. So that was overwhelmingly a blessing, because I was at my wit's end at that point. And it restored my faith. I'm sorry, it restored my faith is what I should say.
How are you able to survive personally? If you don't have any income coming in, how are you able to survive personally?
Personal savings, just savings. Things that you save for. As a hairstylist, you have to save for if you get sick or if you hurt yourself or stuff like that. You always have to be prepared to be off work for a little while. So I had savings, so that's pretty much that, and the blessings from my clients. I will say, me speaking out and kind of relieving that stress off my chest, really just to sleep, because I hadn't been sleeping, because I don't like not being able to pay my bills. I don't like being in that position. I know nobody does, but when you come from a certain background, not having income is stressful. So a lot of my clients did reach out, and they helped a lot in me being able to pay some of my bills and not have to use all my savings, because you're watching your savings just deplete, and it's stressful. It's scary, and then you don't know when you're going back. Everybody's like, well, we'll go back in June. We don't know that, and we don't know what we're going back to. I work in a business that I have to interact with people, so they might keep me closed.
Right.
And that's what I do. That's what I love. That's what I've been bred. I've been doing it for 25 years, I think. So interacting with people is important to me, and that's really my life.
We're going to go to Gay. Gay, tell us who you are, the industry you're in, and your experience.
My name is Gay Span. I have worked for about 16 years in the travel industry. I was an entrepreneur. I had my own business for 14 years. And just recently, I moved over to an executive level position still in the travel industry. The interesting thing for me was that, there's always something with every year, there's something that hits the travel industry. So we're used to getting like a punch. There was last year, the trouble in the Dominican Republic, or year before that, maybe, terrorism in Paris, or just different issues tend to pop up every year in travel. So we always have to overcome a hurdle. So if you remember how this all started, it seemed like it was going to be a cruise ship problem. It was going to be cruises. And then the industry started to feel like, we have to get over this one thing. But then it just grew to be so big that it hit all these different industries. So that's a little bit about my background.
Okay. And so who were you working for? You were recently furloughed, right?
Yes.
Who were you working for?
I'm not really sure to say if I am or I was because it's supposed to be a temporary furlough. Business development director for Ensemble Travel Group, which is a consortium of travel agency owners.
Okay. And how long had you been working there?
So I just started with them, actually. January was my start date. I left the job, the company I was working for prior. Real excited, great opportunity, you know, a promotion, a raise, and I was just getting my feet wet, starting to hit my stride, and then everything stopped. We got notified the last week of March, and the company, they were very intentional. They were very intentional about
Great opportunity. Camila, can you mute yourself, or maybe Shadon can mute Camila.
I'm sorry.
That's okay.
Okay. So yeah, they let us know at the end of March, and they were very intentional in saying, we want to bring everybody back. It's a 90-day furlough. We want to bring everybody back. So we all, you know, we understood, you know, that it was out of people's hands. They wound up furloughing 50% of the staff, like right down the middle. So every department had to get rid of half their staff, half their team, and they've been working, you know, like that since then. So yeah, that's how we found out.
So how have you been surviving since you've been furloughed?
So, you know, I was thinking about my answer to that question because, like, my concerns are not concerns for today, right now. Today, right now, I'm fine. You know, I applied for unemployment. I'm getting unemployment. I live in Atlanta. We have an amazing mayor, Mayor Keisha Lance Bottoms, who put forth the city ordinance that doesn't allow for landlords to kick people out for not paying rent or even charge them late fees. The courts are closed, so you don't have to be worried about paying rent. You know, I've had discussions with my landlord, and you know, they understand the situation and scenario. So any monies that I might have had to spend for rent, I don't have to spend that right now. So my only concerns are eating, you know, being able to buy food, and paying like little minor bills. So my economic concerns are not for like today and tomorrow. Mine are more longer term economic concerns, because when things open up, my industry is going to be very challenged. It's not only the industry being challenged, but so many of my colleagues in the travel industry have also been furloughed or laid off or fired or whatever. And so when the time comes to reestablish, we're all going to be running for the same jobs and different things. So, you know, my concern is, after these 4 months of unemployment and federal assistance, then what?
So are you using your savings or credit cards? How are you paying for your essentials, like your food and your utility bills? Are you using savings? Are you using credit cards? Or
no, like I said, I'm collecting unemployment right now, and that's sufficient for today.
right.
But you know, once we get to a place where, because from what I understand, the federal additional monies are only for 4 months. And that's the only thing that makes that unemployment livable. After that goes, it's going to be really tight. So all I'm doing right now is just saving. I'm not spending money on anything but things that are essential.
Yeah.
And I'm saving my money, my unemployment money, to last me, because I'm just sure if they don't take us back in July, then I'm going to have to find a job, and I'm going to have to hold those monies that I got paid these 4 months to spread maybe 8 months.
Okay. I'm going to have I'm going to bring my panel in. Mr. Spriggs, Mr. Owens, Ms. Solomon, we've heard Camila and we've heard Gay talk about their experience with this pandemic. We know that before the pandemic, there was a racial wealth gap, right? Even before the pandemic. Now that we have this pandemic, and I'll just let you guys jump in. What does this mean for African American families where there was already a racial wealth gap? Danielle, I'm actually going to start with you. I'm actually going to start with you.
Sure. Thanks for having me. I think that's a great place to start. Today in America, there is stark racial wealth inequality. Right now, for every dollar a Black family holds in wealth, a white family holds $10. So why are we talking about wealth, and like, why does that matter in this moment? Well, wealth matters because wealth is that thing that allows families and individuals to move through life seamlessly. It allows you to respond to that unexpected emergency, allows you to buy a house, put your kids through school, start a small business. And unfortunately in America, for Black families, they don't have that wealth at the same level as their white counterparts. We also know that the majority of African Americans can't withstand a $400 unexpected expense. And we know that COVID-19 is going to cost people more than $400. And so I think what we've heard from the earlier panelists is that people are scared, and they have every right to be scared. And I think Black families have a real right to be scared because we were already in a precarious economic situation in America, right? And I think what COVID-19 has done is really shed a light on that inequality and those racial disparities across economic as well as health lines. But it's also exacerbating those disparities. And I think that's what we're seeing right now. My hope here is that we use this really unfortunate emergency to push the policy conversation beyond, just the unemployment insurance right now, but really what are those structural things that need to be changed so we can ensure that Black Americans in particular, but all Americans, are on better financial footing to weather the next pandemic or national emergency that I know we're going to see at some point in our lifetime.
I'm going to have Mr. Spriggs speak on that and then Mr. Owens, but when you mentioned that some people are better able to weather this pandemic, right? We saw examples of entertainers. I'm thinking about one in particular who is like a music producer who was able to go out on a yacht. Are you guys familiar with that? He was able to go out on a yacht during this, during the pandemic to get away from this quote unquote coronavirus. And that really, not only, all people were like, it must be great to be able to go out on this yacht and not to do it. Just wasn't minorities, but most people are like, not everyone has that opportunity. Mr. Spriggs, I like where Danielle stopped off with the whole structural and the policies around the racial wealth gap. Could you pick up on that? And you're muted right now. Yes.
I want to take it in a little different direction.
Okay.
Because this has been presented as if this is the fault of the virus. This is not the fault of the virus. This is the fault of planning and the lack of planning. So this is not the story throughout the world. We know that in other countries, they have followed these same policies of social distancing and trying to isolate so that this disease doesn't spread, but they planned ahead. So right now, if you were in France, I have relatives who are French. I have a cousin, a very young cousin, who was a student at a university in Paris. She works for McDonald's. And as we all know, they shut all the restaurants in France. She gets 80% of her pay.
Oh.
She's not worried. They didn't shut down and say, oh, good luck, let's see how this plays out. They understood we're going to ask a whole lot of people to stay home, so we have to solve that problem. So this is the lack of planning in the US. My counterparts in the trade union movement in Denmark shared how ahead of shutting down, they held national negotiations between labor and management and the government. How are we going to handle this? And they agreed to their work sharing or part work agreements. So workers have reduced hours. Some workers would continue to work at fewer hours, but they were still getting paid. Now, of course, they have paid sick days, they have paid holidays, and the workers had to give up some of those so that the whole scheme would work, because this is a long period of people not working. So they had to give up some of their holiday. Americans don't have holidays to negotiate away. So I think before we get, too far away from this pain, we have to hold accountable this total lack of planning ahead of this. And so that's key to keep in mind. The other thing to keep in mind is, even had we not put in orders to shut down and safe distance,
Yeah.
and you've heard this from both Camila and
Hey.
Gay, that what happens when we come back, because people may not feel comfortable necessarily gathering again, even to get their hair done. I think they will get their hair done, but they may not feel that comfortable. It's definitely the case. People are not likely to feel comfortable getting on an airplane. They definitely are not going to feel comfortable on a cruise. The travel industry will continue to have some issues. So even if we hadn't shut down, there were going to be slowdowns caused by people feeling uncomfortable being in certain spaces. And so that points to the poor way in which we designed all of our systems. The unemployment insurance system, Gay was just mentioning, okay, for right now, while we have supplemented the unemployment insurance system in the CARES Act, thanks to the hard work of Congressman Bobby Scott and some other folks, that means that workers are getting close to the average pay. That's okay if you made average wages. So as an example, in I don't have the figures in front of me for Georgia, but in Virginia, the average worker takes home about $1,120 a week, and adding $600 to the maximum pay unemployment benefit in Virginia got you to $1,000. So understand, though, absent that $600, the maximum unemployment benefit in Virginia, $385. That doesn't get you anywhere near a replacement if you're unemployed.
Wow.
So this highlights some deep problems in our systems themselves and the way they were designed. They're also designed for people who had earnings and could prove that they could get unemployment insurance. In 2019, only 8% of people who were unemployed in the restaurant industry got unemployment insurance if they were unemployed. That's because their earnings are so low, they normally don't qualify for unemployment insurance. So in addition to highlighting existing disparities that we experience because we don't have the savings of white families, there are existing problems with the programs themselves that we ended up relying on here in the US to help people. Beauticians are now covered under the pandemic unemployment insurance scheme. Normally, people who are beauticians are not covered and would not be eligible for unemployment. So we had to fix that so that in this case, they could apply for unemployment insurance. So it just highlights these inequities that were built in. And when you look at the history of why were certain people excluded from getting unemployment benefits in the first place, and you go back, you go, oh, yeah, because Black people held those jobs. So those disparities, are still written into how do you access the system. And so it's important that we not only do the fixes for racial disparities, but we do the fixes for our safety net systems, which clearly are inadequate.
Marvin, I really want you to jump in and talk about, this impact on the African American community, Black families. What's your take on this? We've heard, Camila say she's afraid. Gay says after 4 months, she doesn't know what she's gonna do. These are just two examples, two experiences, but we know that our community is hurting right now. Give me your take on this, please.
Yeah, I think both Bill and Daniela kind of covered the ground pretty well. I would only add that I think we really need to be thinking about how do we rethink society and culture overall. I don't think this is a situation in which we're going to be looking at the pandemic as a sort of blip on the radar and then we're going to get past it. I think we need to prepare for fundamental change. And I think that from my perspective, I see that particularly in sort of in Gay's, her industry, I just think that there's going to be some fundamental change that is going to be long-term impact that we need to be prepared for. And I don't think we're thinking about that right now in this emergency. Some of you, Bill and I were talking off before this thing started, and we're talking, my other responsibility is as a pastor of a church in Washington, D.C.
Yes.
There are people in my colleagues who are asking some fundamental questions about how ministry changes in this environment where you don't gather together, and or when the ban on gathering is released, how many folks are going to feel comfortable even gathering anymore the way we used to. So I think the long-term fundamental changes that we need to be thinking about are something that we got to keep our eyes on, because I don't think that we're prepared as we weren't prepared for this. And so when you talk about issues around paid sick leave, when you talk about living wages, when you talk about why your health care has to be attached to your job or your employer. I mean, these are fundamental societal questions we should be asking, and then talking about how we make some fundamental changes in what our society looks like overall. Because the truth is that what's happening now is impacting our communities in really disparate kinds of ways. And if we don't raise it now, that there is going to be this desire to try to go back to the way things used to be. I think this whole notion of opening up these state governors, particularly in the South, that are
Marvin, we just
about that.
Okay.
Am I back? Who are interested in reopening their reopening these states. There is a clear lack of vision for what is in the best interest of these folks that's happening in these states. And I think that particularly for Black folks, and I don't want to be the conspiracy theorist here, but it is just really interesting that the kind of businesses they're trying to open and then trying to induce people to come back to are the kinds of businesses that are frequented by African-American people and people of color, and are putting people of color in real danger and their lives in danger. So yeah, I could go on and on about this, but part of the conversation needs to be talking about what are the long-term solutions to these problems. This is not a COVID-19 issue, really. It's a real system issue.
Let's talk about that for a second, Marvin. Let's talk about livelihood and safety. You have someone like Camilla, who owns 4 salons in Maryland, in Prince George's County, Maryland. And we know Prince George's County has been hit really hard with the coronavirus, COVID-19. So it's either livelihood, her supporting her stylist and her family. She has 2 children, or safety. So right now people have to choose, basically, right? People have to choose. Do I go back to work to support my family or my health? My family, if I go back to work, I may get something that I may not come back from, and my family will not be supported.
Sure.
And, that's really hard to choose, right? I want to open up my barbershop or my salon because I need the income. I need to support my family. I need to pay my bills. But on the other hand, is there something in between in terms of resources? Because people are not getting these small business loans, right? They aren't getting the grants that the federal that's meant for businesses. We already talked about how the big companies are grabbing those first. And that small minority and women-owned companies, up to 90%, are still struggling because they aren't able to get hold of these funds. So, you know, what's your, I'm going to ask you and Danielle and Mr. Spriggs, but I'm going to start with you about, you know, what's the in between with that? With I have to work to support my family and health, right?
Yeah, I think that's it kind of exposes the fundamental problem with our systems, which is that so many of our people, I mean, people of color, are in positions where they can't work from home. They can't work. They can't telework. They can't continue to not go to work and then receive their pay. So that's one issue. The issue is around the structural problem that exists. When it comes down to the PPP, you know, we talked about this off camera, but the reality is, it was a great idea, but without oversight, without the right sort of regulatory environment in which you are really focusing and targeting these resources to the companies that needed it the most, what you found was that companies that didn't need it, that should not have qualified, were able to get in there and get it first. And so now you see the news where the LA Lakers are giving back the money and Shake Shack is giving back the money, and excuse me, companies that are clearly able to access capital in other kinds of ways are now being shamed into giving back the money. What it says was that the system wasn't set up to really impact the companies that needed it the most. So small businesses,
you just said something.
really were not able to get access. That's why you had the second iteration of the PPP, which was trying to focus in on small businesses, minority businesses, using minority depository institutions, trying to really focus in on how do we target these resources in this way. It was too little, too late. It wasn't enough in the first place, and then it was not structured in a way where the right oversight was there, so that you really could target these resources the way they should. And bottom line is this: they could do 3 more of these bills, and we still wouldn't be able to tap into the need that's there. I mean, I think I saw numbers somewhere where there was over $1 trillion in requests for the money that's out there already. The PPP in first or second form wasn't going to be able to cover the kind of need that's out there, because the need is a structural problem.
Wow.
That we're not addressing. This is a Band-Aid solution for a long-term problem, and we should be thinking about the long-term solutions.
Danielle and Bill, I'm going to go to you. Marvin brought up some, and then I'm going to go to you, Gay, because Gay said she had a comment. Oh my goodness, Marvin, you brought up so many important issues. This was not meant really, this was a Band-Aid for something really bigger. So if African-American business owners and entrepreneurs, if people who have been furloughed, if they are not able to rely on the federal government, what should they do? If they aren't able to access, as you said, they could do 2 or 3 more, stimulus package or CARES Act or paycheck protections, and you will still not meet the need. I'll go to Danielle, I'll go to Bill. I know that's a big question.
It is. That's a huge question. I don't know if I have an exact answer for you, but I want to reiterate some of the points that I think that Marvin made that are great. And I want to support what Bill said as well. I mean, I think that what's really important here is it's not just about the planning was lacking. It's really about the policy choices that our country has made that has been lacking. We are really dealing with intentional policy choices that our governments at the federal, state, and local level have made over decades, over centuries, and it's playing out now in real time. Less than 1 in 5 Black workers can work from home. That's it. 1 in 6 Latinx workers can work from home. So the majority of Black and Latinx workers can't work from home. To your point earlier, they are overrepresented and predominantly work in service industry jobs that require them to interact with folks. Those jobs are also low wage jobs, right? That don't have quality benefits. So they actually do need more money from the federal government. I think, I would like to see the federal government give more money to workers who are at home and are not pulling income right now to me, that is the job of the federal government in this moment. But I couldn't agree more with Marvin that this is actually the time to do some of that structural work to ensure that we do have a national paid leave program, that we actually have livable wages where people can not only pay for their food and mortgage, but they also can put money away for when an emergency like this happens, that we actually have robust, quality, affordable healthcare
Yes.
that is prepared to handle the next pandemic that is happening. So I couldn't agree more around the need to like move away from these Band-Aids and really get to the structural issues, whether that is how we report things to the credit bureau, what that has to do with minimum wage, healthcare systems, all these big systems that have huge structural flaws that you can trace, to Bill's point, all the way back to slavery and how they operate, and really change them so we ensure that there are better outcomes and equal outcomes for Black people in America. This is the unfortunate perfect time to actually do this work, and we need to do this work. I also really I appreciated Marvin's statement around how we view our social hierarchy in society. Like all of a sudden our bus drivers and our grocery store workers are essential workers, but we never treated them like that. But they are literally putting their bodies on the line right now so we can feed our families. So maybe this will force people to pay them a real wage and provide them with quality healthcare. If not now, I don't know when. And so I do think we need to push that message, and we need to ensure we don't just accept the Band-Aids, but really drive forward that reshift of how we value workers in general, whether you are the custodial worker or the doctor, and make sure people have quality of life benefits available for them.
Right.
So I don't know if that exactly answers your question, but I wanted to just make sure that we as like the policy folks, helping policymakers, that we are pushing them not to just do the small thing, but really to do the big thing that is needed.
Bill, could you weigh in, please? Because obviously what has been put forth is not helping our entrepreneurs and those who have been furloughed. And then Gay, I'm going to get to you. I know you have a comment, and so I'm just trying to see what else can be done. Marvin, Danielle talked about the, structural policies that go way back, and we're now just feeling the impact of them. But could you weigh in?
So I want to do one thing first, because Danielle touched on the fact that Black workers disproportionately on the front lines and still working, which helps to explain by a lot why we're disproportionately dying from the disease. Today is Worker Memorial Day. It's the day when we remember all workers who kissed their loved one goodbye, but didn't come home safely from work. It's the day that is normally set aside for that, but this is a time when we really have to remember exactly what Danielle said. It's the people going into the nursing homes and then coming home to their families.
Yes.
It's the grocery workers, these workers that we don't pay well, that get the disease, that bring the disease home, that spread it, and so we get affected. So I think we don't want to lose track of what she was saying about that. And the fact, as she pointed out, these are the very workers we denied paid sick leave to, which is mind-numbing. It's mind-numbing that people who are in the front line dealing with us, either in a nursing home or preparing our food. You're going to go to a restaurant and you're going to say to somebody, your choice is come to work sick and serve me food. Why is this a choice? That doesn't even make sense. It doesn't. It defies common sense. I would disagree just a little bit with what Marvin said. There actually was enough money. If you look at the payroll of the companies that we asked to shut down, they are low-wage industries. If we had gone to those companies, instead of going through the SBA and the banking system, if we had said to mayors, here, if you're going to tell a company to shut down, you give them this money to pay their workers and to pay their rent. It's no different. It's really no different than if we were going to improve Washington, D.C. We said we want to have a trolley go up 7th Street. If we keep businesses going and we try and accommodate you in keeping the businesses going, it's going to cost us $50 million more to do that, and it's going to take us another 3 months to get that done. Y'all shut down. If you did that, eminent domain would kick in and you'd have to compensate me. You couldn't just shut me down. But in this instance, we told people shut down and we didn't tell them, okay, I'm telling you not to operate your business, but here's how I'm compensating you. We didn't do that. Why didn't we do that? Because we have no sense of value to the people we asked to shut down. We had no sense of the value of their company. Trust me, if the United States government said the Russian mafia have hacked into our financial system and we have to shut down Wall Street until we can clean it up, otherwise all the money in America will fly around the world, we won't be able to get it back. You know, Wall Street would say, wait, time out. You can't shut us down and say we're not, you got to have a plan for us. You can't just tell us shut down. We wouldn't do that. We would have planned in advance. We would have told them how we're going to handle it. We wouldn't do that. We wouldn't show that level of disrespect. And so rather than go through existing programs which were clearly inadequate and biased, and now we understand how biased and inadequate the SBA loan program was to minority serving businesses.
Wow.
Now you know that in the normal course of business, it made sense to people on Congress. Well, of course you help out through the SBA. Okay, but we don't get help through the SBA. That's what's obvious now. Now you see that. Now you see what our complaints were all along about the loan program because of our relationship with the banks and the fact that the banks are the intermediary in order for you to get to that program. That is the bias. So my solution is you have to elect the right people.
Back to voting.
Exactly. You don't say the federal government isn't doing something and then accept that the federal government can continue not to do something. Elect a different federal government.
Woo.
Exactly right. I agree. Thanks, Bill.
Oh, I think you said a word. Gay, you had a comment.
Yes.
Okay.
And it kind of feeds in a little bit to what you're saying about, voting and then workers. Some things that were also revealed during this time was that some governors in some states had purposefully made their unemployment system difficult to manage. And they had done that a while ago because they wanted to keep their unemployment filing numbers low. So then when the crisis hit and people really needed it and they needed to get the money out, they had already stacked these systems to be something that people would just give up and not claim, but still not get the help that they needed. So I feel like, as far as, the responsibility placed on individuals to kind of maintain themselves in a situation where they can't, it's not fair. And the other thing that I think I think it's the most disgusting thing that happens is when people make people feel bad for taking funds. That just gets me really, really upset. I remember that was a big talking point, in other issues in our country where they made older people feel bad for taking retirement, or people that are out of work feel bad for taking you shouldn't feel bad for having to take these things to go forward. Any civilized society should have something that helps you from time to time, and you should not be made to feel bad about it. But I think that's the issue. I mean, in this case, people know that the whole world is stopped, so they don't feel as bad because it's like affecting everybody. But there are people starting to say things like, open back up because I don't want to feel like I have to take money. And I just think that's a terrible burden to put on individuals.
Does anyone
I
want
want
to
say something real quick to that, though. I mean, to Gail's just last point, because she's there in Atlanta.
Yes.
Delta Airlines, as wealthy as they are, what was the first thing they did when they felt bad in the travel industry? They went straight to the federal government and said, give me money. So I don't know why we're to feel bad when you look at these powerful corporations, let something happen to them, who's first in line, busting their way to get us out of the way to make sure they get their money.
And how much did they make off of our fees for having to check our check-in bag fees? Billions of, Marvin is laughing at me.
No,
but,
it's true.
But billions of dollars. No, they had billions of dollars of profits for charging us $25, $50 if a bag was over 50 pounds. Danielle or Marvin, you could want to address Gay's comment about, people about governments making it hard for people to get unemployment and then making people feel guilty about getting unemployment. Yes.
Yeah, I'll say two things. I couldn't agree more with Bill. He is absolutely right. Wealthy people have no problem asking for money. They usually get it in tax benefits. So I think like you are actually drawing on a broader problem around like narrative and rhetoric and what has been deemed like unworthy or feeling bad. That's on purpose. Right? And Bill used a really great example about Delta, but wealthy people get benefits from the federal government every day and they don't feel bad about it. They actually pay people to lobby to get those benefits.
Yes.
So, we just need to like turn that rhetoric on its head. That's not how we should think about it at all. And then in regards to the unemployment insurance systems across states, you're absolutely right. We have seen a lot of reporting around the states not being ready to handle the uptick in claims. I think we hit 24 million at this point.
Yeah.
And the systems just can't handle it. And so there does need to be real at the state level, like infrastructure change to ensure that, people can access these types of services. And I'm sure Marvin or Bill can talk more specific about the UI system, but you're absolutely right.
Yeah, I was just going to add something a little strange. I have one of my sons is in school in Southern California, Orange County, and he sent me a Twitter post of there's a bunch of folks in the circle in Orange County where saying open up right now. We want to open up right now. All this open up the state rhetoric, and one of the comments on the feed was in response to someone who's saying that it's dangerous to open up, we should wait, we need more testing, yada, yada. The response was, oh, you must want to be on welfare.
Oh,
and
shame.
so there is this narrative around accepting government benefits and how folks can use that as a way of framing who you are and your value, quite honestly, and your values, I would say as well, that is important that we don't overlook. And so I think Gay is exactly right that we should not make folks feel uncomfortable accessing benefits that they were paying into, and really contributing towards in their work. And so, but I think also we have to now push to make sure that as we're talking about this, we are making demands that need to be made, that we're unafraid and unashamed to make those demands. Sometimes I think in our political processes, we're trying to do something that is that we're trying to negotiate, obviously, and we're trying to come to the middle ground and everyone's happy. And but we are in a state of emergency right now, and we really have to be bold in terms of what we're asking for and the kind of systemic change we want to see. And I think now's the time. There's no better time than now to start really talking about how we change systems to benefit everybody.
Yes, and I would say this, Black people were always saying, we tried to tell you. And when they set up the unemployment insurance system, the original hearings held in the 1930s, the NAACP testified, do not make this a state-based program.
Wow.
We tried to tell you.
We tried to tell you.
It doesn't work. It inherently does not work, exactly for what Gay was saying, that the states view this as a favor to business, that they don't tax them as much, and therefore it gets viewed as a business tax, even though economists argue about who actually pays the tax, whether it's workers or the companies. But that's how governors market it. And therefore, there's an inherent race to the bottom. Coming out of this, it will be even worse because right now, the state unemployment insurance systems are all bankrupt. They weren't designed for 20-some million people to apply. This will be the third time that the state unemployment insurance system will have gone bankrupt in the last 50 years. So if it's that unstable, that tells you the design is wrong, which is why the NAACP said this in 1935.
I think Marvin brought up something. He said something very important, and that's value. Who does our government value? Right? And I only have we only have 4 more minutes left. It's almost 2:00. I wanted to ask how, until there are quote unquote structural changes, until there are different policies, how can we pivot? How can African American businesses, Black families, what are some resources, or how can we pivot so that we can support our families in times like this, right? Bill, you want to take that? You're already on the
Well,
and then I ask
this
Marvin and
gets
Danielle.
to Danielle's earlier point about the wealth gap. There's also a liquidity gap. So a portion of your wealth can be your home, which is not very liquid because you can borrow against it, but you can't just go into the bank and pull money out that easily. But there's a huge liquidity gap, and it's at every level of income, comparing Blacks to whites at the same level of income. We simply don't have the ability to just gather up some money or have access to credit to weather these kind of storms. And that comes from, if you're going to give up 25 cents every hour, every day you go to work, then yes, the other person could have the liquidity. So this is deeply rooted in our pay gap. So at every level of education, we're giving up 25 cents every hour, every 8 hours of the day, every 360 some days we go to work. This is the problem. So we have to deal with the discrimination that gets us the higher unemployment, that gets us the lower pay when we do get employed. Until we can close those gaps and be serious about attacking discrimination, then we're going to have the liquidity problem and we're going to have the wealth problem. When you look at the home ownership gap and then look at the income gap, you understand where the home ownership gap comes from.
Right.
Based on income, such a small share of Black households actually qualify, actually have enough money to pay the typical mortgage. So this has to be eventually addressed.
Danielle and Marvin, you guys want to weigh in?
Sure. I'll just say, on your broader point around the pivot, I mean, all these structural and policy things need to happen, but on the like day-to-day right now in this moment, I think Black people have to do what Black people always do, right? Is like make lemonade out of lemons, right?
Yes.
Like we have to do our hustle, which is what we have always done. And hopefully we will get to a point where we don't have to do that. But I think in this moment, we just have to do what we always do, which is, just hustle and hope that like we can get out of this and know that we will. I mean, this is not the first time Black people have, dealt with a recession and we've come out of it. It's hard. It's always harder on us. We are always the first to be fired and the last to be rehired, but we do come out of it. And I think we have to keep the faith that we will, come out of this stronger and better. And I really just want folks to know we have to push for the structural change and not be willing to just take the Band-Aid.
Before Marvin answers, I really want to point to Camilla's story earlier, where she said her customers paid via Cash App to support her and to support her stylist. Like, for example, if you were to get your hair done once a week or every 2 weeks, you continue to pay your stylist. And the fact that the African American community was coming together to support this business, I think was awesome. And I go to go to Marvin for the last. It's 2:00. You got the last.
I'm just gonna emphasize what you just said. I haven't been to the barber in 5 weeks, and yet I still send my barber
That's a blessing.
the fee and the tip for my every 10-day, every 2-week kind of visit. It's something that those of us who are still working and still have income can continue to support our own businesses, continue to support the folks that we work with, continue to support in the ways that we can, whether it's the folks who cut the grass or the people who whoever they are. We have to continue to do our best to support them even in this moment. I think that's something that we can do right now, beyond the structural long-term kinds of things that simply must be done.
And then in November, vote the people
and
out.
Vote. Elections have consequences. Is that correct? Elections have consequences. We need to make sure that we get engaged.
So I want to thank each of you for your participation in this conversation today. This was a great conversation. We learned about the structural policies that created this quote unquote perfect storm. And we learned about the discrimination that continues that have, created this racial wealth gap. Please tune in next week. We will be talking to nurses and doctors on the front lines who are risking their lives by taking care of coronavirus. And please tune in tonight for the NAACP and BET's 4th virtual town hall. They will be talking to Governor Andrew Cuomo and Atlanta Mayor Keisha Lance Bottoms. Okay, Marvin got me right. Thank you guys so much for your participation. And have a great day.
You do the same. Thank you.